Okay, it's October the 5th, 2023. It's about 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and today I want to talk about an aeration contract. I am a big fan of contracts. I will say this, let's just say that this video was created for myself when I got started. I had no resources. I had nobody to talk to help me get started or anything. And the internet was around, but we didn't have smartphones like we do now to kind of help and find videos on everything that's out there. So this video is intended for Joshua when he got started and needed some direction on creating a contract for aerations. And I'll add to that I'm not providing any legal advice to anybody. This is just a point of reference, specifically for myself when I got started. And I understand that contract law might be state specific. So what I would also do after I watched this when I got started is I would have a meeting with an attorney to go through everything here, because in my experience over the years when I have met with attorneys and I had them create contracts from scratch, they haven't known what the heck they're doing with the industry. They might know some basic things, and they would charge me $300, $400, $500 to create a basic contract, and a sixth grader could write it better. That's just the reality. So I do most of my work, nearly 99.9% is on the residential side. I have zero interest in commercial work, and that's by design. And that's my niche. My niche for my business, my clients are residential property owners or tenants. So the purpose of the contract, I would tell myself, is to put into writing the address, the contact information of the client. I have been provided from clients in the past the wrong address, the wrong phone numbers, etc. That created maybe an issue where we might work at the wrong place and maybe cause damage to someone else's property as a result. Or I haven't been able to get a hold of them after we've done work to be paid. The contracts that I've created for my clients, outline what we're going to be doing and what we expect in return. So it creates a point of reference for everybody involved. And I'll be very brief about this. The most recent example of the benefit of having a contract is I had a customer called me and he wanted his front yard to be completely redone. We were going to come through and kill it off with a brush killer. And then sometime thereafter, we were going to come through and deliver so many yards of tree leaf compost and then take a Harley rake and mend that into the soil that he had, even out the grade. We were going to overseed, and then we were going to put some peat moss on top of that so he could have a front lawn again. Well, somehow, after 3 weeks after we gave him the estimate, he decided to approve it, but said that he was going to have an irrigation system installed. And so why is that an issue? Well, it was an issue because it was more work, because he was going to want us to do the grade initially, have the irrigation system installed, and then we'd have to do a final grade on top of that again, which is more work. And so I explained to him, you're going to have a new contract, and he didn't understand that. In addition, there was a large landscaped area that wasn't a part of the original contract that all of a sudden now was a part of the contract, and that involved some extracting of the shrubs, etc. And it was going to need more product. We were going to need more soil. Anyway, we didn't end up going through with it. I mean, at one point in time, he said, he called and said that he was going to have the irrigation guys come today, and that we could get started, I don't know, a week later or whatever. But the point I'm getting at, things kept changing, and we couldn't stay. He didn't understand that the cost was a direct reflection of the work detailed in the contract, and that anything I've done above and beyond that would have to first be put into writing and would incur additional costs. So I've aerated a lot of lawns in my day. I've aerated an awful lot, and I've used my experience. This video is for myself when I was younger. When I first got started, the reference that I never had, or some initial advice to get going that I never had. That's what this is for. And even having said that, after I watched it, I would take the contract that I created and give it to an attorney to review, because it has been my experience over the years that when I have hired attorneys to either create contracts or discuss contracts, so many of them are just clueless about details for the industry. I mean, just about contract law in general. I'm not selling myself contract law here. I'm just using my experience to build a contract. So I want a contract from a customer that includes the address for them, a phone number, and an email for them, as well as the physical address where the work is going to be performed, because oftentimes You might have a property owner that doesn't live in a home, or you have a property owner that is going to be moving into a home and hasn't moved into it just yet, and they want you to do the work. They have the okay for work to be done or whatever. So having a contract to have that information, their contact information, phone number, email address, etc., all that stuff helps. You got to have that in your contract. And then I detail the work. And basically this is what I do. I create a contract, and I've got one here that I was going to put a file together that you would be able to take, but I don't know how to do that on YouTube, so I didn't do it. So what I would say is this: all my contracts are written, okay? And they're 99.9% the same when it comes to aeration. But that said, oftentimes they are multiple pages. So as part of my instruction to my client is I have to receive a printed and signed copy of every page of the estimate, not just the initial cover page. Okay, every page has to be signed. And so there are several things that we have to do in Indiana. The first thing that I include in my estimates is a notification to the customer that we do have a dig law in the state of Indiana, and 811 has to clear the property for utilities. Now, there's no real utility that I'm ever going to come into the potential reality of possibly hitting, aside of the internet cable, the phone line, the cable service line, because oftentimes that's an inch under the ground. And what I have found over the years is there are some cases where there are some slopes on properties with soil where that line runs, and you can lose some soil over the course of time through erosion. But that's the only line that we could ever potentially hit. As a rule, we typically stay 1 to 2 feet to the left and the right of those markings, because those markings aren't exactly where that line is at. They just serve as a point of reference. So I have many clients that will tell me, well, I've had my lawn aerated for so many years, 20 years, it's never been an issue. Hey, that's fine. If you want to hire someone that doesn't care and that doesn't want to follow law, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to sit here and judge them, but we're going to do it the right way. And I tell them this too, a healthy 80-year-old man wakes up day in and day out all of his life, and one day all of a sudden wakes up and has cancer. Just because he hasn't had cancer in the past doesn't mean that he won't wake up with it one day, and it doesn't mean that he will. But there always are exceptions to every rule in life. There's always a first time, and I don't want to be that individual that's responsible for cutting someone's line. Okay, I don't want to create the headache for them that comes with that, especially now when so many people are working from home. And then let's just be realistic. If you cut someone's ability to get onto Facebook or their social media platforms, they're not going to be real happy with you, right? So anyway, they come in and we contact 811 for them. It's real easy. We can do it on the website. Their website now, it takes not even 5 minutes to do, whereas in the past when you had to call all the time, it took quite some time. I also indicate in the contract that they are responsible directly for marking any of their private lines. The private lines would include things like irrigation heads, if they have buried landscape wiring, any drip systems in the mulch beds that they might have, invisible pet fences, okay, that kind of stuff, a buried water return, for example. Their responsibility to mark those. And what I've seen over years, is that a lot of people will save their flags from 811 and they'll use those to mark the irrigation heads, etc. But the problem with that is it can create some confusion, especially if they have an invisible pet fence with an irrigation system. Because then all of a sudden I'm wondering, wait a minute, what is this? I have to go out and check it. And even after you go out and check it, when you're up on the machine driving around, you can get confused. So what I always, I encourage my clients to get, highlight or like neon colored flags from Lowe's. You can go to Home Depot or Menards, even for that matter, or some other big box utility store, and get those types of flags. And so for like the irrigation system, I would say flag all your heads with the pinks, and then for your invisible pet fence, flag all your the perimeter with the greens or the neon orange, whatever other color that they have there. And then what I'll often do after I do the work is I'll gather all the flags, all of them, for the client, just to kind of help them out. Sometimes I don't. I think it just depends on my schedule, but that is my ultimate goal, so they don't have to mess with that when they come home. I've done the work and they're good to go. I also put a note in there, okay, about furniture. Okay, I'm not a fan, unless they're a really old person and they can't do it. I'm not a fan of moving trampolines, any outdoor furniture or anything, because a trampoline specifically, it's got to be secure to be safe. If I move that and then a windstorm comes through, I'm potentially liable. And I don't want anyone to get hurt. Aside from liability from a business and legal perspective, I just don't want anyone to get hurt. So I put a note in there that the lawn has to be in condition that we can do the work. Okay, it's called lawn notes. You agree to have, whatever, is necessary to be moved out of the way, and that you'll move it. You understand that we're not going to move it. And I've never had a problem with that. Again, we put it up front in writing for the client to have, so they understand the expectations for the work to be done. I also advise in the contract next that there are certain sections that we might not be able to do. This could be sections out front in that little space of grass that's between the street and the sidewalk, or is right next to a tree or a mailbox, or areas right up against the structure like a garage or a home that we can't get super close to, or wet areas. It's very common, especially the deeper that you get into the fall, that you can get stuck in someone's lawn. Tearing up the lawn a little bit is normal when it comes to aeration. I mean, you want to minimize it as much as possible, but you're going to be turning around, you're scarifying up the lawn, so to speak. And so, mild impressions will work themselves out, in the coming weeks. The issues we run into are lawns that are either well over watered, or B, just have areas that hold a lot of moisture. It could be, where two side lawns come together from houses. It could be back in a corner or whatever, or it could be a little section of a property where there's a slight hill and you can't really run the machine without running, a risk of getting into the fence. I just outline in that contract that there are certain areas that we can't do, but the overall goal is to provide an efficient and very thorough aeration. And sometimes my clients will ask me if I'll do a double aeration. It's not necessary the way that I do mine. If you want to do a double aeration and you're not going to charge for it, or you are, you put that into the contract as well that you have for them to sign. A single aeration is X. If you'd like a double pass, like a crisscross pattern, for example, you could charge whatever. I do a little bit of an overlap when I'm aerating, so I'm about 30% over the previous line that I already went at each passing. The result is a very good aeration. It's just a very good aeration. So aside of that, the next thing I point out is that, we talk about watering. I don't like the lawns that are regularly irrigated, to be watered for 2 days prior to the aeration being performed, because oftentimes the ground is just too soft, and I don't want that. If it's not regularly irrigated, then I do ask them to water it the day before, so there is some moisture, because if there's no moisture, it could be like running an aeration machine on concrete. You're not going to get any plugs. We need some moisture in there for the plugs to be pulled. And then sometimes they'll ask us to add a humic acid application, or maybe overseeding. And I never do overseeding unless I also put down a starter fertilizer. I do hold a 3B license from the Indiana State Chemist Office in the state of Indiana that allows me to put down the types of products that specifically, address or promote that in some way they are going to control pests. And because I am for hire, I have to have that license. So I include, typically what happens actually is everybody that asks for an aeration, or everyone that gets mowed or whatever, gets an estimate for aeration. They get an estimate for aeration, and then overseeding with their starter fertilizer, a humic acid application, and dethatching. And they're not going to necessarily take all of it, but they're going to get the estimate for all of it. That's just the way it is. I don't hound them on sales, but I get everything out to them so they can decide. So if I'm slit seeding, for example, I'm listing in the contract, or if I'm overseeding, I'm listing in the contract the variety of the seed that I'm using. Am I using tall turf type fescue? Am I using Kentucky bluegrass? Am I using perennial rye? Am I using a blend? And then also I'm going to list in the contract, the product that I'm using. Is it a 21-22-4 with mesotrione, or is it a 16-28-12 that's just a straight fertilizer? I also include aftercare instructions, If I've done seeding in that aeration, then I advise to them that they need to water at least, 14 days daily, and then they need to use their best judgment in the evening. So oftentimes I'll just tell them to water it a second time in the evening. But they've got to water the lawn or it's not going to respond. Once all that is said and done, I include, I put a clause in there that, we can't control everything, and that they agree to hold us harmless for anything, any damage that happens as a result of the work, but happens that's directly out of our direct control, our direct control. Can't speak today. It's just a little clause in there. That's it. And then I outline the payment terms. Will we accept check? Will we accept Zelle or some other online payment option like Venmo or whatever? Or will we accept cash? Will we accept a credit card? All that kind of stuff. I also indicate in my contract that payment For most of the case, or most of the times that I do this, the payment is due the same day that the work is done, no exceptions. And so let's say that I did the estimate for $500 and I put it in there. And then I put a clause under there. Your estimate is listed at a same day pay discount at $500. If your payment is not received, for any reason on the same day that the work is done, the same day discount falls off and the new balance is $50 more than what the discount was. It motivates people to pay their invoice. And that way you're not running 2, 3, 4 weeks after the fact. I also put in a late fee in there. It's due that day. But I also put a note that 14 days after the work is that is finished, if we haven't received the payment, if we haven't received it, doesn't mean that they sent it, okay? If we haven't received it, it is due. It's already due the day we did the work. If we haven't received the payment by 14 days thereafter, there's a $25, $35 late fee. I also put a quote in there, a section in there to talk about, collections. And the fact of the matter is, this is a business. It's a standard contract that I create. If we don't have a payment received from you by X time, 30 days, 60 days, whatever, then your account might be forwarded to collections and might possibly incur legal or collection costs or whatever. There's something in there to protect yourself. Okay, you've got to protect yourself. You got to have, they got to understand that it's a contract. And I've never had a case when I include any of this in there where a customer has said, I just can't do this. There have been some that have balked at it if I've changed the estimate because they've added work, just like the example I left at the start of the video. But I got to put something together that gives me, peace of mind. And that's how I do it. It is a very standard contract, but hopefully, you've got some notes from this that you can, that you can avoid some of the pitfalls that come along with this, because everything that I've mentioned, that I've addressed, that I put in my contract helps me to overcome 99% of the obstacles that could come up in the scope of work. Okay, it tells my clients how to prepare, what to expect, what my expectations are, and then boom, we're done. And I never have a problem anytime that I have them create a contract. The problem is when I'm aerating a guy's lawn and the neighbor comes out and says, man, can you do mine? What would you charge me? No, sir, I can't do it. It's not marked by 811. Oh, please, I don't have anything here. Look, there's been a time or two over the last 17 years that I made the decision, okay, fine, I'll go ahead and do it. I don't do that anymore. There are too many things that could come up because that same individual that has an irrigation system that didn't flag, his irrigation heads when he saw me doing the neighbor, and didn't think to tell me. Of course, I know now to ask, but didn't think to tell me about it. And as a result, his irrigation head gets marked. He wants me to replace it, and understandably so. I'm the professional. I'm the contractor. I know what to expect. If I'm going to cut corners, there are risks associated with it. So I would encourage you not to cut corners. Draft yourself an agreement off of this so you can make more money, you can minimize the headaches, and you can protect yourself from possible loss. I hope this video has been beneficial to me. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Let's help other people out. Peace.